I always tell people that I'm excited for these kinds of sit down recordings when you can sit with a friend, have a meaningful conversation, and potentially put some good information out there for videos like this to be a good reference point for fans of various toy lines going forward. Obviously, today's target audience is G.I. Joe Real American Hero, but as you can tell from the thumbnail and the description, we've thrown in some Delta 17 stuff as part of this just because I had access to the step-by-step process for the figures on that one. But with that being an O-ring brand, I thought, hey, it kind of works to match that up with GI Joe. Now, it's not every day I get to talk to somebody who's as obsessed with the pre-production process as me. And this individual, we've known about each other for a little while. We finally met at Joe Fest in 2025. And he's somebody who I kind of consider as a bit of a professor when it comes to pre-production and the development process of G.I. Joe Real American Hero during the vintage era. So from the Articulated Points YouTube channel, we got my friend, Patrick Stewart.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good, my friend. And I know I said you're part of the Articulated Points YouTube channel, but you also help co-run a nonprofit organization called Joe Declassified that sets up a lot of the conventions.
Yes, I feel really fortunate to be a part of that. Really, a lot of the setup at the conventions is the effort of Chris Murray. He does so much of the legwork, and the other guys, handle some of the finances regarding that. Because no matter what you do, there's going to be some expenses. Um, you know, Display cases. There's a lot that goes into that. And also, I'm not the original person. It's not like I'm the original person that thought of doing that. So I really just feel very welcome there because there's a group of friends that a long time ago we just kind of knew each other and we'd show each other stuff. But then Nomads, I don't know if I should call him, but like I'll just use a screen name. Nomads said that he thought it'd be a good idea if we just kind of got together at a convention and made it available to other people to see. And it was really a perfect suggestion that launched Joe Declassified as it is. And then we had Gary Goggles for a long time as well. He, his contribution can't be overstated. He did so much for us, and he was a wonderful presence. We still miss him. But also Chris Murray's been doing the booths so well with his setup. We usually set up at Joe Fest. We also set up at Assembly Required, which has been around longer than Joe Fest. So we've been setting up there, I want to say since the third AR. That's kind of the one that we really get excited about every year. And we always try to have a brand new panel ready and bring a bunch of fun stuff. That's a really good show.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard that the it's kind of a highlight panel every year at Assembly Required in November there in Iowa. Um, and people who come out of it are always like, "Wow, did you see what D Class put up?" And I'm always like, "No, I missed it," right? Because they've yet to really take the trip over there to Iowa, so I know I'm missing out, right? And Joe Fest is so busy, you miss most of the panels anyway, unless and I mean because I mostly work a booth at Joe Fest. But so one thing I wanted to touch on here is before we launch into our slide presentation, what compels a person like yourself to jump into the pre-production process of like collecting?
Well, honestly, I think that question requires probably some self-reflection on what I obsess about. And it's probably just the fact that I am always interested to know more, because the toys that shaped our childhood were so creative and cool, and a lot of ideas went into them that didn't end up in the final product. Some details got changed or moved or lost and costed out sometimes along the way. And it's almost like the same thing as watching like a DVD that has deleted scenes on it. Whenever you can find out these additional bits of information, for me, it feels a lot like finding out that there was a cutscene to, continue the comparison. There's just ideas that almost were in our hands as kids, but ended up not there. And then sometimes stuff that just kind of happened along the way that was coincidence, and things ended up being boosted and more amazing. I just love hearing the stories of what went into things. And so my obsession to find a couple of things that were slightly different has resulted in me diving in headfirst into all these other bits of information, and it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm glad that we touched on that because the for me, it's all the backstory, the history. How did
Yeah,
something get made? What was the step by step process? And a lot of it repeats over the course of like, okay, this figure's made this way, so the next figure's made that way, right? And back
yeah,
during the 80s and 90s, your before you did your tooling, you had your two up hand sculpted item,
yeah,
right? And even just finding out that they had to make them double the size to dial all the detail in, and then the actual size of the figure would be 3 3/4 inch, right?
yeah,
And so for me, it's just kind of like when I see it, to me, it's a piece of art, it's a piece of history. It represents the foundation of what that figure and very much what the toy line was built on. Like, I respect everything that happened before we found that thing hanging on pegs in the big box stores back in the day.
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I always view that stuff. I always think of it as art. It's art that's going to be mass produced. But I remember at one point in college, I was buying Beast Wars toys, and
Yes.
I had this discussion with somebody who didn't agree with me, and they told me that it wasn't art. And I'm like, don't you have like a Monet poster inside your room? Don't you have like art, something that you consider art, but that's not really the original piece. That's a mass produced thing that is based on the original painting. So, I mean, what is art is such a big question, but to me, you have these people who are incredibly talented, putting work in throughout the process, whether or not it's the original like concept, which that's always just interesting to see happen because of pieces moving sometimes from one character to another, something that
Yes.
got left off of one character and ended up being recycled into another and made it into the toy line. From that to the point where uh, seeing the original turnarounds, those drawings, it's like that's the first. Chris Murray often mentions this a lot as his favorite part of the process because it's the first time that they drew what it would look like as a toy. And then the sculpture, that's certainly requires a great amount of artistic skill. And the people that they had working on GI Joe were top-notch people in the world. And
Hmm.
then even the people who are capable of making the tooling that makes these things had to be skilled craftsmen. Like they had to know exactly what to do to take that sculpt and have it not look like garbage by the time it got injection molded.
Yep. Absolutely. And so we're going to actually dive into all of that now. And what really impressed me, what kind of kicked off this conversation is I watched your 4-part eco series that features mostly you and Chris Murray over there on Articulated Points with some snippets in there from Philip Donnelly.
Mm-hmm.
And all of you have contributed to 3djoes.com. I think many of you contributed to yojo.com
Yeah.
back when it was more active. And I started looking, you had final engineering pilot samples in your collection, and so did your friends, and so did the people who weren't in the video but contributed information to the video. And it just got me thinking about the whole thing. Now, we often talk about after the tooling is made, this tooling being the big steel molds for people who may not know, where you press the molds together, you put the plastic in, you pull them apart, then you assemble the figure, then you paint the figure. But
Mm-hmm.
even before that, right, we talked a bit about the two ups before, and this is a photo from my project manager with Delta-17. And the first item there is called the check model, and this is more of a modern process before you go into the tooling. Back in the day, you had the check model was probably not 3D printed in resin like it is here, right? But before the tooling, the way my project manager described it to me, because we're launching into the topic now,
Mm-hmm.
was you had an initial model, right? You make a duplicate of that model to send to your client. So in this case, it would go to, me and Steve, really mostly my partner Steve for Delta-17 because he would do all the QC checks.
Yeah.
Then Steve submits a paintmaster, which has all the final paint details on. And then the final step before is that check model because that dials the proportions in exactly how you want it before the tooling. Then the tooling is cut and then you get the test shot and the EP and all that post-tooling process leading up to the final retail item. I thought I didn't have a better slide to start off with, but because those first two samples there, the check model and the T1, those are kind of on opposite ends of, like, those are immediately on the two ends of when the tooling is made. Like in between the check model and the test shot, that's when the tooling is cut. So I thought I'd set that stage there for people who are tuning into this and kind of curious about what we're talking about, and then we'll get a bit more technical after that. Launching into what I said before the check model, though, you've got your paintmasters, right? And what I'm showing here is the Delta-17 Hailstorm, which basically says, here's what all the colors need to look like, at least for the blue version. And Carson had posted on 3D Joe's, actually my logo is blocking the Operation Recall sign right there. Let me just get that out of the way so everyone knows where it came from.
This is Mortefero, right?
Yeah, this is General Mortefero. How do I get... Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm trying to get rid of the logo so we can see the Operation Recall logo there so everyone knows where I got it. This is General Mortefero and the Paintmaster that Carson had. And I think this one might actually be a 2-up because it's done double the size because he actually followed the old process, right? So, obviously, once all that's done, and once you've done that check model, you then launch into the post-tooling process, and this is the process that you describe quite heavily in your Eco Warrior series and in some of your other videos, right? Now, yeah. So this is the traditional process after your tooling is done. You have 3 rounds of test shots and engineering pilots, and hopefully by the time you get to the end, that final engineering pilot is supposed to mimic what your production sample is, but as you'll see later in items that are in Patrick's collection, that's not always the case. So in a perfect world, you get the test shot and you say, okay, the fittings aren't dialed in perfectly, so tighten this, loosen that. Then you get the EP, which is the right colors, your first shot of paint. And you'll see in the back, the boxes were there for sizing. Those white boxes are there for sizing. And then the final engineering pilot is what it's supposed to look like in production. Now, and I know it's hard to see the one that's in the box, but aesthetically, this was one where we were fortunate in this case because visually, the EP and the FEP had no visual differences. But what happened was when Steve received the EP sample, he realized that the hose was glued to the face and it was supposed to be removable. And then when he tried to roll it on the ground, the wheels were not moving. Like, you could move them, but you would have to take the figure, turn it upside down, and roll them with your finger. They didn't roll naturally. So those are the 2 things he adjusted before we went and did the FEP, which isn't always in the package, but this one is to give us the full picture as to what happens. Right?
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah, and this is the traditional, it's a modern process, but it also follows the traditional T1 EP and final engineering pilot. As you get into a better relationship with your factory, there's actually a step in the middle, and Patrick, I think you've heard of it, it's called the VSP, which is after the T1.
Yeah.
Right? And that's basically an advanced test shot. The reason they do that is because the T1 is done in the tool shop, right? The tool has not gone to the factory yet. That's just to test the initial tooling. The VSP in the middle can be done at the tool shop or it can be done at the factory if you're confident about the rest of the process. That VSP is a more dialed in version of the test shot. And depending on how confident or how good the first test shot is and how confident your project manager is about the rest of the process, they're going to send you either the T1 or the VSP. In this case, they sent us the T1 rather than the VSP. But it's easy to mix those. It's easy to mix those up because they're gonna look the same unless your project manager tells you otherwise. But in the traditional sense, these are the 3 phases. So either the VSP replaces the T1 or the T1 stays, but you usually get 3 phases. So
and it's difficult, like if you're just a person collecting these and you just come across it, to know whether or not that thing would have been done in the tooling shop or on the factory floor.
Oh, you wouldn't have any way of knowing, right? We didn't. I had no idea any of this until we started talking more with Joseph, our project manager. So maybe you're getting a bit of an education out of this too. Some
of this stuff, some of it I've heard. It's difficult to piece things together because over time, a lot of like terminology has been invented by collectors just so that we're all on the same page of what it is that's being sold. And then some of that terminology has been adopted by other people. Like, I had somebody who worked in a factory saying, test shot's not a real term. There's no such thing. And it wasn't an action figure factory. It was like they were making other plastic items. But he was like, that's not, he was a toy collector though. So it's like terminology is important so that we're all on the same page and we know what we're talking about. But, you know, you compare Star Wars collectors and G.I. Joe collectors, they may not necessarily always, there's a lot of overlap, but they may not always say the same thing.
Right. And the terminology that we're using here, you know, T1, EP, FEP, I've heard that's very much a Hasbro thing.
Yeah.
Our project manager with Delta-17, Joseph, came from Hasbro. Dave Proctor, the project manager for Callsign Longbow and Skeletron, came from Hasbro. So we end up with a lot of continuity of terminology. I've heard Mattel doesn't follow exactly the same terminology, right?
Yeah, I don't know about Mattel, but even going back as far as Transformers, I've seen things even labeled FEP.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but Transformers would come out of
Takara.
Hasbro. Well, that's true. They would do.
But
that's
you
true.
know, Takara for Hasbro. So who knows?
Yeah. So who invented it? Did Takara use the term?
Because this is actually you manufacturing something. So this is more than just, you know, collectors finding things and coming up with a term so that they can buy and sell and collect between themselves. This is terminology that's being used to actually get from the point where you have nothing but an idea all the way to the point where you have a product.
Absolutely. And what it is when I talk to my project manager, I was trying to say, like, what's the blanket term? Because we call it pre-production or we call it prototypes.
Right.
He says prototype actually in his world is just that first model before you've even done the paintmaster. And then pre-production is what for him is an alternate term for the FEP. So, but for us, they're blanketed enough that as collectors, we use those terms kind of interchangeably for the entirety of the process, right? For us, anything that doesn't look finished, we call a test shot, but it might be a VSP. It might be this thing, which I don't want to confuse anyone too much. This thing that I've labeled as a mold sample. Now, the reason why it's called mold sample, I didn't understand it either. But what happened was with the Red Okami, right? You have some of our Delta-17 items, so you're familiar with these characters.
Yeah, I have a full collection of the figures. I still actually need to pick up the robot. It didn't get
the Hailstorm.
One of those while it was the Hailstorm. Yeah, I did not get one of those yet.
Nuts. Well, online after, I guess.
I will get it. Yeah.
So the Red Okami, what happened there was our project manager had transferred us from one factory to another. And one of the things he wanted to do, he wanted to do a mold sample. I mean, mold samples, he said, is usually done in the factory, but he did one in his shop, and that's the Red Okami that you see there that's not colored, because he just wanted to nail down the color of that thing before giving it to the factory, right?
Okay.
And because he moved our factories, but because the test shot was already done with the original Okami, this is effectively, he basically just needs to nail down the colors. So the mold sample is just for color matching, right?
Okay.
We would look at it and probably think it's a test shot or a VSP.
For
right?
sure. Yeah.
Because what he said to us is, this mold sample is not actually technically, it's not a review step that you send to a client. Like, Steve and I are not supposed to get these, but when they have extras, they'll send it with the EPs and the FEPs later on, right? So this is not actually a step that the client reviews. It's an internal step for the factory to nail down the color, right?
Okay.
Now he said, now, can the mold sample take the place of a T1 or a VSP if you already have the right color in your shop or in your factory? Yes, but that's not likely. So this is just basically for color matching. And as you can see, basically the color matches or almost matches what the full production item looks like. So yeah. But again, unless you're talking to somebody at the factory, we don't really know. Somebody might, like, if I kick the bucket tomorrow and my wife and kid try to sell this, someone will tell them it's a test shot and they'll advertise it as a test shot. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
Right. And they wouldn't technically be wrong, right? Or maybe, yeah.
Now, the other thing that this is making me think of is whenever I've seen old tooling that is found that sometimes would actually have a sample kept with it to indicate what that tooling is. Is that also what what these mold samples may have done? Like you would keep one with the actual tooling? Because I've seen that happen sometimes whenever things are shut down.
Yeah, I'm
Some
gonna
stuff in
say
the factory will come out.
I'm gonna say highly likely, but because we're not because the client isn't even supposed to review these, which means somebody kept them, which meant the
Oh,
factory probably kept them. So most likely that's what you saw. Having said that, this information was told to me by my project manager in 2024. The stuff you're finding in the past might be from
oh yeah, it's old.
1994. So
Yeah.
assuming there was continuity in the process, you probably found a mold sample, right?
Okay.
And incidentally, and this one will be more familiar to you, right? See, I just generally use the word pre-production, but the lieutenant. Sorry, this is going to be a bit confusing for people because in 1992 it was Big Bear, and in 1998 they renamed him Lieutenant Gorki. When I bought and I've blanketed the term pre-production sample in the middle because I didn't know what it was. When the person sold it to me, he sold it to me and called it a test shot. Now,
Right.
knowing what I know now, what probably happened was they didn't need to do the two up because they already had Big Bear's tooling. They probably didn't need to do a proper test shot. They probably just did a color match sample to get to Gorky. They probably jumped straight to that step. And that's
Yeah.
probably what I have here, right? But I didn't talk to anybody at the factory. I'm just putting two and two together.
Yeah. Sometimes the club would actually, like in the club roundtable at the JoeCon, they would describe some of the steps of their process. And sometimes they were actually ordering tooling to be used just so they could see what was available. They'd be like, the factory would say, yeah, we found some stuff. And, back then I don't know if they didn't have the ability to just send pictures or the pictures weren't clear enough, but they would order samples to be made. I don't necessarily use terminology test shot because that's probably what I would call it. And you'll end up with weird things. Like I know that for a while there were a bunch of them floating around that were like muskrat with Hydro Viper's arm. And people were
Yeah.
like, well, what's the deal with that? Or there was a sample figure of Destro, and that ended up being used, but just Destro version 2, I should say, the Iron Grenadier one, and they used the chest on that to make Overlord.
Mm.
So sometimes they were having the tooling put into use and figures sent to them just so that they could find out what they could make.
Right. And it's in your Street Fighter video, but sometimes they just kit bash stuff together and painted it for Toy Fair
Yeah,
catalog reasons, right?
yeah.
Right. And you've got one of the few high resolution Toy Fair catalog samples in your video. There. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff in that Toy Fair catalog, I think, is just Hasbro coming up with ideas to figure out how they were going to handle those and using whatever samples they had to get a close approximation so that they could get to marketing these things. And I think that sometimes happened too, because like looking back as far as even like the Stinger driver, um, catalogs of him show him with straight arms, but the figure never had straight arms. But if you look closely, it's a hand painted figure.
Yep.
So, I think that because of the fact that the marketing needed to take the catalog photos at this time, and the time frame on getting samples back and finished figures was going to happen later, they needed to send something, and so sometimes you'll end up with just figures that are done, by hand, but purely for marketing, not really for the purpose of the production of a figure. And that happened a
Mm.
lot with vehicle drivers too. Like, I don't know if you saw the Ferret, the driver of Destro's Demon, with the Cobra Commander, the Battle Armor Cobra Commander head.
Mm.
Clearly that wasn't an intention for how he would come out, but they were just kind of tossing together an approximation of something so that they could get a figure in that vehicle to say, hey, it's going to come with a figure.
Well, I mean, you pointed out in the Street Fighter video that, Ryu uses Quick Kick's head and Guile actually uses Bulletproof's
Yeah,
head. And there's a
yeah,
lot of things like that, right?
yeah.
So,
They didn't have them
um,
sculpted, so
yeah.
yeah, or they did, and they weren't 1-to-1 yet.
So here's a mystery. Have you any idea why they number their samples sometimes? I never knew.
You know, that's something that I've talked about a lot more with more modern stuff. I don't think I've ever seen that on anything like 94 or earlier.
Yeah.
Um,
This is technically 98, so
right.
right. Yeah.
I think the two theories that I've been told, or that we're almost running with, because again, as collectors, we just kind of have to guess what the process is sometimes, and think about how things are. Is that you would just kind of number them as you're safety testing them. So maybe this figure still exists because he passed all the safety tests, and nothing broke on him, and number 33 was a-okay in the test. And that could
Mm.
be the drop test. That could be whatever test
Yeah.
the figure may need to go through. But then one of the ways that I was getting figures in the like the 25th era and the Rise of Cobra era was there would be pieces of figures. You'd look, and there'd be a figure would be missing a hand, another figure would be missing the head, another one maybe the foot, and then they would get pieced back together, and there'd be one good figure and a bunch of parts.
Mm.
And I think the way that what was happening there is that they were actually being tested for chemical safety. So parts of the figures would need to be burned and destroyed in order to see, what colors came off of them, or maybe thrown in a test tube to be checked for lead or whatever it may be. At least that's what I was told. I actually came across a document at one point that had the schedule of safety testing for some of that stuff, because Hasbro can't ignore, safety concerns. So a lot of these samples have to go through that before full
Mm.
production begins.
I wonder if this is a question that someone should throw to Vinny DeLeva or Kirk Bazigian someday. That might actually be a good question to ask one of
Now,
them
what that
when we get the
33
chance.
means, because I don't really know.
If you ever talk to any of them and you just want to screenshot this and take it, you
Yeah.
might already have it in your notes.
Yeah.
Or maybe I can send it to Carson and see if next time he talks to them,
Yeah, I'd be curious, because Vinny probably would know, because he would have been still working on stuff this late.
Yes.
But yeah, I've seen a lot of this though with stuff from the 25th and Rise of Cobra era. There'd be a lot of like A1, A2, B1, B2 even
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. So I know I front loaded the first half of this presentation with Delta-17, and then one of the very few pre-production samples I have of GI Joe, just because I wanted to set the stage for the process. But what I really wanted to do was also show people in the audience out there some of the stuff that's in Patrick's amazing Eco Warriors 4-part series, which I'm gonna leave the link in the description to Patrick's channel, and part 1 of the Eco Warriors series in the video description, so people can go back and reference it. But earlier, when I mentioned that the FEP, or the final engineering pilot, is supposed to match full production, but sometimes does not. And while I said there were 3 key steps, you might redo some steps, and I imagine that's what may have happened here. But why don't you, if you recall offhand, why don't you talk about some of the differences here between your final engineering pilot pre-production versus the full production one that we bought at retail?
Well, there's
For
one very unfortunate difference, but I will get to the fortunate ones first.
Mhm.
Obviously, you can tell that the Cobra logo is a brighter orange. I do think that it kind of gives a little bit better color separation between it and the color change, because that Cobra logo is brighter. It doesn't look as much like a Cobra logo to me, like the Cobra on his chest. So I could see why they changed it. I think I like the finished figure as far as that goes a little bit better, but that's definitely different. You could see on his left wrist that the strap around there has been painted gold, and then on the lower legs, the braces. Those are actually, we later found out that those were for climbing trees. That the idea behind Cesspool is that he's part of the logging or paper industry, and so those are intended to be braces for tree climbing. And that's why the other additional accessory that's missing from him is a spike. Is that
Mm.
that was where that concept came from. And that actually, we found that out from the interview with Vinny that Jason did from Order of Battle.
Yep.
So that was really good. But the unfortunate detail of this is that I take care of my figures. I'm not rough with them. I don't even have most of the stuff standing up on display, because sometimes gravity can even wear on your figures. And I had him in one of those plastic clamshells laying down. And as I was picking the figures out to look through the video, the crotch I noticed was broken on that cesspool.
Oh,
And in looking to see what I could do to repair it, or to at least hold it in place to make it look okay and presentable for a video, I realized that that was one of the differences between the two figures, and that they had addressed that between the sample figure that I have and the finished figure. The finished figure actually has a bit of a reinforcement there on the inner part of the lower waist to prevent it from breaking. And he's not a figure that frequently has that broken. So they succeeded. It was a good change that they made. So yeah, the differences in figures interest me. I've always also been interested in production variations, but I like to see how there's very much a rush to make sure everything is right before they go to production. But sometimes changes happen after production as well, and then you end up with a variation. And I think that this is no different. Whenever you have multiple FEPs, they're just trying to get things right before they go wide. And I have seen some people tell me, well, how can you call it the final engineering pilot whenever it's not the last one and doesn't match what went into production? And it's like, well, but sometimes I've seen them labeled FEP1, FEP2. I think in a recent video, Lenny even said regarding classified line,
he did.
He made it all the way to FEP3 on that one.
Yes. And what people don't necessarily understand is that FEP is a step, but it's a broad step. Right? Yeah. Because while my Hailstorm that I showed earlier was a boxed FEP, Steve has both a boxed FEP and a loose one. Right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it has happened where in our wave 1 of Delta-17, our card backs do not have the barcode on the back. We added that after FEP. So people can ask the same question. How can you call it final? But FEP is a broad step that might have several sub-steps in between. Ideally, you only need one. But but see right there, I did not know, maybe you said it in your video, but I did not realize that you studied the crotch difference here between Cesspool during his FEP stage to his full production stage. I did not realize that had happened. And now through kind of trial and error, you ran into that information, and now we can broadcast it to the internet.
Yeah. I can't remember if I did put that in the video or not. It's definitely something that I was really sad that it broke. And I do still kind of hope that I find another one sometime in the future. I like my stuff to look real nice, but
no, but that's why yours is a pre-production sample, though. That's why it's that.
Yeah,
because it's not perfect, right?
Yeah.
So, and just for completion of discussion, you also put in your video there with Chris and Phil that the mask changed as well.
Yeah, and this, I kind of get the feeling that what was going on here with the Eco Warriors is that the accessories may have been on a different schedule than the figures, because the samples for that I have for Cesspool and for Clean Sweep, neither one of them have the mask painted. And of course, a Flint, if I get a hold of one, and that's one of my big things that I'm trying to find. But his mask never had, or the finished figure didn't have it on there, so it would be no surprise to find that without it. And I did not get a helmet, I don't think, with my ozone. I would have shown it in the video if I did.
Yeah, but I don't think you did. I don't think you did. So
yeah, I would assume that he wouldn't have it painted either, because whenever I've seen some of these figures bagged as well, they're not bagged with all of their accessories, which makes me think that the accessories may have been sent over at a different time.
You know what? When I picked up Gorki, actually, you know what? I'm trying to remember now whether Gorki has a backpack. I think he does. I think you can just see the hint of the black backpack. But when I bought this I guess color match sample, all it came with was the gun, and the gun's an off color.
Yeah, I've seen the orange gun before for some of the 98 samples. So that's what I've seen.
Because sometimes the weapons end up on a different tooling block,
Yeah,
right? Like, yeah, you might put it with a figure, or you might put it with a bunch of other weapons. So it just kind of happens, right?
yeah,
And as part of the
yeah.
same discussion with Eco Warriors, moving from Cesspool, was this yours or is this Drew Haggerty's FEP?
This one's mine.
Okay,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
Drew has one as well, but his has some other small, like his looks like it might be one in between. Again,
Mm,
like you said, FEP is more of a stage than it is an exact science. So I think that the one that Drew had um, came in between these, and I think that Drew's is bagged, as I recall. I remember
yeah,
showing something of Drew's that was
yeah,
bagged. You could see that the splatter on it is a lot more um, dramatic. And yeah, sometimes over time, that paint ends up almost picking a stage that it's at and not wanting to change much anymore. But I think that the paint on this really is a lot heavier as far as the distribution of it on the figure. And then the other big things really to look at here are the gauntlets that are painted green, and then the red details on the lower legs.
yep.
And I believe actually, if you on the other side of the figure, which isn't pictured here, I think there are some more red details on the arms. I think it is. There's a couple of other things that are slightly different, but yeah, this is certainly not a finished figure there on the left. Although it's the quality of something that's finished.
Right. But that's the part that probably collectors, especially those who like to dig deep into things, will find
Yeah.
fascinating. And with you being a pre-production collector, right? And being obsessed with studying the differences, just like your friend Drew, just like Chris Murray, it's good to see this, right? And to be like, yeah, what could it have looked like? Would I have preferred a green gauntlet with red details there? I mean, was it a cost saving measure? I'm not sure because they clearly, they took the red off the bottom, but they added the red to the. Oh, I guess they would have to paint it green anyway. I thought maybe they got rid of paint details, but added one. But no, they didn't. They'd have to paint that green anyway
Well,
because that, yeah,
yeah. I mean,
unless.
by taking that away, though, they probably only had to do the one stage of the red, just from the gauntlet up to the hand, right?
Yeah, now I'm starting to wonder, like on the full production figure, would the lower arm be cast in purple and then painted red, or would it be cast in red and painted purple? Now I'm
Oh, it's
wondering.
yeah. They're cast in purple.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense to match
Yeah.
the upper arm.
I've seen
So,
that change though too. Like that's one of the changes that I have on a Red Star.
mm,
The Red Star figures that were released, um, the forearms are cast in flesh, and then
mm,
the elbow is painted with the brown of the cloth sleeve.
mm,
Whereas the pre-production one I have, the brown of the cloth sleeve is the same plastic color as the rest of the brown outfit, and then the flesh is painted.
mm,
And sometimes they swap that around so that as you're putting accessories in and out of hands, they don't chip.
mm. That's
That's
actually,
I
see,
assume that's what the reason for it is.
no, but that makes sense, right? Because the dominant color, right? Darren
Mhm.
Howlett from Legends of the Hidden Force always told me, actually, he's a former Declassified
He
member,
is.
Joe
Yep.
Declassified member, told
Yep.
me that you always cast the dominant color in that on that piece of plastic.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
the
that makes a
the
lot of
base
sense.
color, yeah,
Yeah.
because you want to minimize the paint hits, not maximize them. So, and then because we talked a lot about the 90s, between the 98 Gorki I had and the Eco Warriors, for those who want some love of the 80s, Patrick here also has a few pre-production samples of Ace from '83.
Yeah, and I think this is another example of a figure that just looks much better by the time they've made all their changes. But the history of it, like if you see this, once you see it, you will see it in other places. That's one of the other fun things about collecting, or even just knowing and learning about pre-production figures, is that sometimes you end up seeing them in marketing material, or you see maybe sometimes animation models based on earlier pre-production ideas, or you're looking through a comic book and you're like, oh, hey, that's actually was cut from the figure, but apparently Marvel was shown the way that it was originally.
Mm-hmm.
You probably would never pick up something so simple like that is what's here on Ace, but looking at it, I think that you can almost imagine a couple of possibilities here. That additional length
The
in the
collar.
head.
Yeah, the
Kind
collar.
of
Yeah.
the collar, yeah. It kind of puts the head sitting a lot higher away from the shoulders.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look quite as good as the finished figure next to it. But the other part is that it may have actually been rubbing on the canopy. Like, I wonder how well. I would love to have one of these
Ah.
loose. I don't have an ace like this loose, but I would love to see how it actually works if you put it in the Sky Striker. Like, can you close canopy?
That's actually a great thought, because you're right. It does look a bit more polished when you lower the collar a little bit here.
I actually grabbed these so that I would.
Oh, yeah.
Figure took a dive. He'll be okay.
Be
Yeah,
okay.
but I grabbed
All right.
these so that I would have them handy as well.
Yeah, I could quickly full screen you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So you have more than one pre-production sample of Ace, and I'm going to show
This
the
is
side
the
view.
production.
Yeah.
I believe this is just this one. This is a production Ace.
Okay. Oh, you can see the collar here, right? Okay.
Yeah, you can see the difference in the collar there, and then there's the more different one here, which you probably have also to show.
Yes, I've got that on the next slide here, I believe. Yeah. So I know it looks green here because of the light, but it's actually gray, right?
It is, yeah. It matches like the gray that's on his sleeves or the stripe down his leg.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's.
Oh, I'll quickly solo layout. I'll quickly solo layout you so we can see the differences. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Right. The other thing is that, and you can't really. Man, I'm trying to get.
I can see the gray behind. I can see the gray behind the.
You can, but there's another difference between these that I don't know if I even talked about when I showed these in the video, and that's the fact that they seem to be still dialing in the flesh tone on him, because he's a little more pink than the one that is gray, which is most likely the earlier figure.
You definitely did talk about the flesh tone change in some figures. Oh yeah, there. You can totally see it there. Yeah. I don't know whether you talked about it in this video about Ace or whether you talked about it in one of your other videos, but you have brought up the flesh tone before. Is the collar higher on that pre-production as well?
Yeah, they both have the high collar compared to
the production
production figure here. Yeah.
Right. So what I was really trying to point out too is the gray paint deco behind the helmet there.
Yeah.
That's another big difference on this other pre-production that you have.
It is, and in the commercial for Ace, there's the animation of him that would have been done by Sunbow, actually, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. And whenever he flies in, just very briefly, he looks kind of all gray.
Yep.
And I have to wonder, was there a stage of that? Because I've seen the Ron Rudat drawing that's amazing, and has a couple of differences. Like, his boots are different in the Ace presentation art, but he's wearing white. So I have to wonder, was there a stage where they were thinking about making him more gray? Like, what's the reason for the helmet being like that? And, why is he like that in the animation?
And both your pre-production samples were sold to you as FEP, right? Or were they not labeled?
Well, yeah. I mean, pretty much sold to me as FEP. The people that I got them from were, I knew for a fact that this was coming from not far from Hasbro.
Right. So, they're packaged, so you don't normally package till the FEP stage, right? The only time you package is the EP.
Strangely,
that's not true.
Early on in G.I. Joe, like the 1982 stuff and the 1983, anything that was sent to Hasbro seemed to be put on those red bubbles. Like, even completely unpainted figures. That's how they were. Just very early on. I think that maybe going into 85, I think they may have stopped that. But again, it's not like I see bagged 85 test shots.
That's fair. Yeah. I did not know that, because I know for modern toys now, if they do send the packaging early, it's usually just to size it, and it wouldn't have any detail. Like, it wouldn't have been red, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's just kind of to protect it. I know that Chris Murray at one point got a bunch of figures from Palatoy, and they had been shipped a bunch of unpainted figures in order to create that early Action Force stuff. So if you're looking at a catalog and a figure's in there and painted, maybe he has straight arms, or she in the case of Quarrel,
right?
And that's not how they came out, but those would have been what we as collectors would call test shots. But They may have just been running figures that were unpainted for the purpose of Hasbro having something
Yeah.
to use in marketing catalogs and get whatever they needed to done.
And you know that terminology, while you can have an official set of terminology,
Yeah,
it doesn't translate all the time, because when I was talking to Ace from Ramen Toy, he doesn't go by EPFEP. He goes test shot 1, test shot 2, test shot 3, test shot 4.
yeah,
And his final one might be test shot 7 before he goes to
yeah.
full production.
And
So
I've
he
actually
just
heard
goes by
someone
that.
from Hasbro refer to some of the painted stuff from the 25th era as a test shot.
Yeah.
And I think, it's people are putting things sometimes in layman's terms. It might
Yes.
not be what they would put on a document and send off to somebody or officially sign off on, but we're all just trying to communicate.
Well, I mean, let's say Vinny DeLeva, who was the brand
Yeah,
guy for GI Joe and other toy lines in the '90s. I think he worked on WWF and Transformers in the '90s as well. If he's sitting there at the bar shooting the breeze with you guys, he'll probably just blanket the term test shot or blanket the term pre-production, because he doesn't have the runway conversationally in that moment over a beer to explain the differences to everybody.
right. Yeah,
Right, and it doesn't matter at that point. The idea is it's before the final. It's a prototype of some
Yeah.
sort. Right.
right. Yeah,
Yeah. No, thank you for allowing me to have a look at these photos. And this is an interesting one. Now, this I don't think is necessarily tied to a phase, but it's part of your friend Philip's collection here. I just thought this was neat to see. The septic tank production one, and the septic tank from the commercial, the physical, actual septic tank from the commercial. Philip Donnelly owns it. Hey.
yeah, yeah. He has a really good septic tank collection. Actually, he's been he'd kind of done a separate video on the septic tank before we even got around to making the Eco Warriors stuff. That's what the Eco Warriors just kind of added up to. Hey, we like Murray and I talked about this because Chris Murray and I will do like live things, and then Philip and I were making videos, and it's like Philip had made the septic tank video. I'd already done one on the toxic time bombs. And it was just all adding up to, we need to do something big for Eco Warriors. And then Brian Sauer from Assembly Required said, hey, I'd kind of like to do Eco Warriors. And we were like, it's on. It's time that all this stuff comes together. And yeah, this is Philip's. It has to be one of his prized possessions. I'm always nervous whenever I see that connection point on the turret.
Well, yeah, the turret was done differently. Was done differently in that pre-production versus the vinyl.
Yeah, yeah, and looking again, that's something you'll end up seeing in other places. I think in the cartoon, you kind of see that it doesn't quite look like the finished thing as much as it looks like what Philip has.
Yeah,
because Phillips obviously still has like the entire turret portion from the his tank, just with the two side guns off, and then an entire bracket that leads up to holding that piece up a lot higher. Yeah, and there's a lot of neat stuff that he shows off in the video.
Yep.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Now, this kind of takes us to the end of at least the core part of the discussion. And because I did not air this live, it's not like I can pull up questions from an audience for this. But what I do hope people get out of this is an appreciation for the things that could change, and just the importance of how some of these early renditions of toys, what they mean to some of us as collectors, and to know that there are people out there studying this stuff. Like, Patrick, you like to call yourself Patrick, not Jean-Luc Picard Stewart.
Not Picard Stewart, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, no. What was his first name? What was that his first name?
His name was Jean-Luc, yeah.
Okay, good.
I usually just truncate it to not Picard. Early on in the internet days, I would actually type Patrick, not the guy from Star Trek, Stewart. Yes. And then I realized, you know what? If you know Patrick Stewart and you're going to you're going to make fun of me for that or do whatever you're going to do, you know who Picard is. So I just shortened it because it was quick to type Patrick, not Picard Stewart.
Yeah. Well, there is because of your love of G.I. Joe and how you educate people, there is a Patrick Stewart character that I do think you resemble. And that'd be Xavier.
Oh. Okay, well, I appreciate that.
So if you want to
is.
if you want to bracket Patrick Xavier Stewart instead,
Oh,
I'd go for it. I mean, you're too humble to go that route. But when I'm watching your guys' videos, you, Chris Murray, Phil Donnelly, it's not very often that I feel like I'm sitting in a college lecture learning something and I'm actually interested, right? Because you all have collected that information. And I sit there and I just go, wow, they did that. Wow, they changed that. Oh my, imagine if we could have bought that at retail. Oh, they changed this. Oh, they swapped the weapons out. Oh, they moved this around, you know? Or even your guys' deep dives on the old Toy Fair catalogs, right? And the
yeah,
changes that happened there, like how they couldn't put Street Fighter Ken's name on the Toy Fair catalog
yeah,
because of the Mattel copyright of Ken doll,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right?
You don't want Mattel getting a hold of one of those at Toy Fair and flipping through and seeing that there's a Ken, and then
Yeah.
trying to stop you from releasing that whole toy line.
Now, if I ever get a Ken figure of myself, I'm protected because I have my driver's license ID, so I'm not a fictional character, so pretty sure I'm
Right.
safe from Mattel's copyrights. But yeah. So before we wrap up the discussion here, I did want you to, I mean, you already talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but I did screenshot the Joe Declassified title page here on Facebook and how you talked about it being a group of collectors who collect pre-production stuff, whether it's artwork, whether it's movie props, whether it's toys like we've shown, and kind of have a roaming booth that goes around the country at shows. Is there anything else you want to add about Declassified?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, and I'm sure that Nomad would be eager for me to add that it's not really just about pre-production. I think that whenever we pull that stuff out, that's kind of the stuff that hits the most because it's the things that people haven't seen yet. But Joe Declassified also is about just uh, making GI Joe information more accessible, and it's more than just pre-production. Like there have been years where uh, and this isn't something that I can do because I haven't collected it, but he's collected a ton of international stuff. So
Mm.
whenever Joe Declassified did the international panel, I sat and watched and loved it. And so international stuff, uncovering figure variations. I was the person keeping track of variations on yojo.com for a good chunk of the time that the community had access to change yojo.com.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of things on there that, like, if I could add to it, I would add to it. If I could take some things away, I'd take them away. It's one of those things where we kind of want to recurate a lot of the variations, maybe get those listed on 3D Joes. But
Yeah.
Declassified is very committed to revealing, discovering, and learning more about GI Joe and making that more accessible to everybody else. And that is a gold mine whenever it's pre-production. But it's also important that we talk about the retail stuff, the merchandise. We've got some people who really know all about GI Joe merch, and it's almost anything across the time 1960s till now. We would love to have it in the booth.
Yep.
So if you're somebody who's like, well, how can I get involved? Well, just talk to us.
Yep.
We quite often have stuff in the booth. We usually ask that people don't take pictures because the thing that does is make some people a little more likely to put their stuff out there, because there are other implications whenever pictures are allowed.
Hmm.
But we want to make multiple channels for people to feel comfortable sharing GI Joe information, because all of us benefit whenever we get to see it.
Right. So that was actually one of the things that I noticed because I visited the Declassified booth at Joe Fest and I noticed the no pictures thing and I remember feeling kind of both ways about it. In one way,
Yeah,
if there's no pictures, how do we help educate the public?
yeah,
But not everybody. And Adam Skalmowski was the one who Adam Skalmowski, for people who don't know, he runs or co-runs the big GI Joe Real American Hero Facebook group, the 82 to 94 Facebook group. It's got a really long name. He's the most active admin on there, and one of the things he said is not everybody is honest about their intentions when they take a photo. If I
yeah,
take the photo, I'll either make an informational video or I'll bring you on a stream like this and show them and talk about it. Other people might make their own reproductions and sell them on eBay.
yeah.
And I heard that was one of the reasons why. So it's kind of a twofold thing where you want to get the information out there, but then you don't want too much of it out there because Carson told me stories in the past about fake two-ups being sold,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And people getting
that's an
burned.
unfortunate reality. Yeah.
Yeah. Um.
I also have, we've also had things like and my brother one time was a victim of a fake listing. He bought Glenda, which from that's not a cheap figure, but we're
From
talking a
Argent
long
7,
time
yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
And it didn't ship and didn't ship and didn't ship, and then eventually you find out, oh, it's a reused photo.
Yeah.
Whoever put that out there didn't really have it. And since some
Yes.
of this stuff hits hard and so many people haven't seen it, it's a very cheap and easy way for somebody to make money fast, to show a rare item and then get a bunch of bids. And we don't want that happening. But like I said, some people just feel a little skittish about encouraging that or having their stuff be part of that. So hopefully anything that you see in the booth is something that we eventually get around to showing online anyway, because we have tried to show a lot of that stuff online and make it available.
Right.
Um,
But you're showing it in a curated form
Correct.
that's labeled, that says FEP there, and it's
Yeah,
on
because
that channel.
yeah,
Mm.
and that's the other thing that's difficult, is sometimes whenever information's incorrect and gets tacked to an item almost for eternity, it seems. Sometimes you have to be like, no, that was bad information from the past. And so
Look at the name Wonder Bread He-Man. It just stuck,
exactly, yeah, it's
right?
stuck. I mean,
It was never Wonder Bread, right?
that's a part of the story of that figure pretty much forever. That's going to come
Yeah.
up every single time.
Right.
And it's not true, but it's part of the story of the history of collectors trying to understand what it was. Now that one would have been a really difficult thing to have tracked down before you showed anyone, because obviously they were floating around. But some of the stuff, yeah, it is just fun to uncover and hear what it's about. So a lot of the stuff does end up online anyway, but the stuff that doesn't, there have been times where it's been handy, and we've learned things before we put them out there, and it's been more informed release of
So some of the stuff that's in your Street Fighter video and your Eco Warrior series, what made you decide to say, okay, this is okay to be included in a video and show the public?
Well, I
You
think I
know.
showed everything, as far as I can think of. I really was just trying to be as informative as possible.
Mm.
But I can't really think of anything I can't think of anything we didn't show. The only thing I will say is that I messed up inside the Street Fighter video on one thing, and I'm fairly certain. Do you remember a spot in there where I showed an accessory set and I said I didn't know what it was, but
Yep.
I was maybe hoping that it was something from the Street Fighter 2 Turbo set?
Yep.
Okay, well, if I would have just been smart and taken the Ken Masters figure that I had that was bagged and had the blue accessories and flipped it over, I would have realized that it was that same accessory sprue, just in
Oh,
blue.
I
And so it's
see.
most definitely what I thought it was. But sometimes even when I'm putting that in there, I don't want to put conjecture so much into a video,
Yeah.
but I
And if you
want
do
to show
put,
it and
yeah,
be like, this may be pertinent. And that was as much
right.
as I knew at the time. I would have known a lot more if I'd flipped that figure over. But you know how it is. You're gathering all this information over time, and then gathering it like across maybe a month or two in order to put it into a video, and then you have to take the time to edit the video. Sometimes you find things out during the edit, and that was one
Yep.
that I didn't know that. I wasn't wrong. It's just maybe a little more informative to say, hey, it's most definitely something from the Street Fighter 2 Turbo line that would have been part of GI Joe.
Right. No, that's fair. And that Street Fighter 2 Turbo line, those photos were actually quite helpful for an upcoming Street Fighter video that I did. I think I gave you a preview of
Awesome.
that, and I
Yeah.
went and linked it back to yours. But yeah, well, I think one of the final things I want to talk about here, because it's going to be related to everything else anyway, is the Articulated Points YouTube channel. So everybody go and subscribe.
Thank you.
Patrick and his friends are criminally low on subscriber count relative to the wealth of knowledge that's on the channel there. Like, like I don't get this impressed. I don't get quite as impressed by people's knowledge as much as I do when I'm listening to these guys talk, right? When they put up a
really
video,
appreciate it.
Oh, when you guys put up a video, right? And again, I only came into the channel late because I mostly knew you as the occasional co-host of Full Force podcast and one of Darren Howlett's old partners on GI Joe on Joe Declassified. So I only came into the Articulated Points channel when I was talking to cousin Kenny at Toy Department in the last few months. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
appreciate
it's
it.
oh yeah, it's very impressive to just go there and listen and learn, and just something that I recommend everybody get into.
Yeah.
I mean, Patrick, is there anything else you wanted to touch on over here?
I will just thank Philip again, because if it weren't for Philip, I'd still be fidgeting trying to make Articulated Points perfect before we even got it off the ground. Because very early on, I really wanted to be a better editor and be better at everything before we even went live. And Philip said, we just got to get started. And that was the correct decision. Our videos have gotten better over time. Both Philip and I challenge each other each time we're going to put something out. And yeah, I really appreciate him motivating me to actually get started rather than to just have the dream of having a YouTube channel with some fun content on it. He pushed me to do that. And also, thanks again. We've talked a lot about the Eco Warriors video. Chris Murray, that was a lot of information he had, and he and I always do the panels at Assembly Required that are a live thing. And then it was like, well, we could take some of that live information that, it's got to be roughly an hour when it's live, but it can be a lot longer whenever it's a video. And I tell you, if you watch those Eco Warriors videos, they are a lot longer.
It's the total is over 2 hours when you get through the 4 videos.
Yeah, that's right. It must be, because I think whenever I cut it up, it was 30 some minutes of video.
Well, if Chris is in the mood or if Philip's in the mood, they have a standing offer to come on here and share their knowledge as well. Because one of the things I told Jason Merle from Order Battle Podcast, one of the things that I've told Hooded Cobra Commander 788 is that there's a massive pool of knowledge for the people who've been studying this stuff for 20, 30, sometimes more years out there. And not everybody is leveraging that information to put it out to the masses. Right? I mean, yes, you have your Articulated Points YouTube channel, but my channel would have a slightly different audience, right? Chris from Full Force would have a slightly different audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other channels have different audiences, and it'd be good to educate people, especially since you're keen about the topic, you're passionate when you talk about it, and so are all your friends and co-hosts there. And I just love to preserve this information for the future. Right.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And that's one of the things that's made me enjoy collecting and doing well whenever I've found stuff. Just in general, is that the stuff that I don't know, I know somebody who knows a lot about it, and I can go to them. And I think that is one of those things, like you said, that people have been doing things for a long time. I want to hear more from them.
Right. Absolutely. Well, if that's all, I just want to thank you for your time today. Like I said earlier, everybody go check out Articulated Points. Search up Joe Declassified, like the screenshot showed earlier. Actually, I'll try to remember to leave that description that link in the description as well.
I appreciate it.
So yeah, all right, that's all we have. I'm gonna
Thank
click
you so
end
much.
show right now, and thanks for your time, my friend.
Thank you.